Hey there, folks. This is Misadventurer here today with the 11th developer diary for my Imperator Rome overhaul mod project, Hegemony. Since the previous dev diary, I worked on a few more areas, as well as creating essentially my alpha or beta version of one of the core systems of Hegemony, which I've talked about a little bit in the past, but I haven't really shown in full until this video. And in fact, quite a bit of this video will be about some stuff that I've not shown on the Discord quite yet. The Hegemony Discord is linked in the description, though, if you do want to follow along there and catch most of my new updates and smaller updates that I give between each video dev diary. So first and foremost, let's talk about some of the new areas that I've added to the map, and they are all in the north, featuring, of course, everyone's favorite future successor state, Macedon. Here we are up in the north with the young kingdom of Macedon. In 431, we are about 105 years before the reign of Alexander the Great, and Macedon is in a very early stage of her rise to power. We are basically just beginning that journey. In fact, in many ways, the power vacuum left by the end of the Peloponnesian War is where Macedon really began to thrive and exert hegemony over the rest of the Greek world. But at this stage, Macedon is a small and still developing young kingdom. Now, I have not actually designed the character of the king yet, but I have done some research about the situation in Macedon's monarchy. It is quite complicated during this period. Essentially, the king of Macedon is named Perdiccas II. In fact, let me open up my own research here to double check. Perdiccas II, all right, I said that right. So basically what's going on with Perdiccas II, again, this is not Perdiccas, but just imagine that the character is here on the screen as if I had made it yet. But essentially, the king of Macedon, Perdiccas II, has just finished in the last couple of years essentially reunifying the kingdom after it was split Gavelkin style, if you know Crusader Kings and the Gavelkin system. After it was split between him and his brothers, he has now assumed full control over the entire kingdom. Though his two brothers are very much still alive and in his court, they are going to have special mechanics dealing with their factions of supporters who want to see them take over the throne over him. Now, in particular is one of his brothers, Philip. Not that Philip, that's a different Philip, much later in Macedonian history, but this particular Philip is the supporter favored by Actini, which means that Macedon, who is an ally of Lacedaemon and not necessarily a member of the Peloponnesian League, but allied with the Peloponnesian League, they've got their own internal situation going on, which Actini can and should try to exploit. One of the ways Actini can destabilize Macedon is empowering Philip's faction of the Macedonian court in order to try to see a bit of a change of the regime from Perdiccas over to Philip. And the other brother, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with him, but it was the case that there were two brothers, so I'll figure out some cool, maybe an alt history scenario with that guy. Maybe that's the brother that you, as the Macedonian player, end up sort of favoring the faction of and switching to if you want to go unaligned in the conflict. Because Perdiccas is friendly with Lacedaemon, they're allied with Lacedaemon, and I think as well that although Macedon is Peloponnesian aligned, that is Peloponnesian League aligned, their alliance with Lacedaemon can be changed, and I think what will happen if Lacedaemon loses hegemony over the Peloponnesian League, the Macedon AI or player will get an event basically saying, you know, your ally Lacedaemon has kind of declined. Do you want to keep your alliance with them and help them reestablish Peloponnesian hegemony? Or do you switch to the new Peloponnesian hegemon, perhaps it's Corinthos, perhaps it's Elis, perhaps it's somebody else, and basically leave your declining Lacedaemonian friends behind? So Macedon, as this distant but very, very powerful swing element in the Peloponnesian War up here, can very much play a big role in the power dynamics in the league, and in many ways, Lacedaemon really should try very hard to keep Macedon in their corner specifically, which is to say keeping Perdiccas on the throne of Macedon as much as possible to ensure their hegemony is not to be messed with by rising powers in the Peloponnesian League. So as usual, Macedon, like everything else I put into this mod, helps complicate the political situation within the leagues. Now, Macedon, in terms of other mechanics, it is, let me actually hop in here to just to show you this here. So Macedon also, mechanically speaking, has a lot going on in its home area as well. region speaking, Macedon exists across sort of 4.5 regions. Now, the Macedonia area is split into 3 sections: Notos Macedonia, Anatolia Macedonia, and Ditika Macedonia, South, East, and West Macedonia, respectively. Macedon also completely controls the region of Mygdonia, which is a fairly recent acquisition from the Thracians. We'll talk about the Thracians more in quite a bit more in just a minute here, but Mygdonia is very much still kind of a borderland for the Macedonians. It's not really fully culturally developed. And again, I haven't added all of the cultures and whatnot, or all the cities and whatnot onto this area of the map here. I've just done sort of a first pass with laying out the tags and doing some localization. So either way, the situation in Mygdonia, it is very much a borderlands of Macedonia, and it's between them and the infamously politically complicated Chalkidike peninsulas. Now, politically complicated not in the sense of it being politically diverse, as essentially all of the city-states along the Macedonian and Thracian coastlines are all in the Delian League. They're all friends of, or sometimes colonies of, Athenai. And although, of course, in this mod, you can very easily play ahistorically, and all of them will have, of course, some options to leave the League. In fact, during the course of the Peloponnesian War, Athenai repeatedly came back up here to deal with rebellions from their League, just like that. And another interesting dynamic going on up here, and we'll talk a bit more about some of the specific city-states in a minute here, is what's happening over here with the Basilia Odryssae. This is the Odrysian Kingdom, and although at the minute I have them sort of ending over here, they're actually going to span all the way over much of this territory up here, up until the separation between Europe and Asia, as this, and what you'll have on the map ultimately with this entire massive, long Odrysian Kingdom is only a tiny fraction of their full size. During this period, the Odrysian Kingdom spanned essentially across all of modern-day Bulgaria, into Romania, further into the Balkans, and this was an enormous and very powerful tribal kingdom whose very edges are basically on this map. So I've included them, and I'll continue including them mostly along the inland areas here, because they played a very important role in the politics of the northern Aegean area. Now, first of all, the Odrysian Kingdom is a bitter enemy of Macedon. These guys fucking hate Macedon, and Macedon does not like them just as much back. And a big part of their contention was this situation with Mygdonia. Now, this is considered by the Odrysians to be a Thracian region, and the Macedonians consider it to be a Macedonian region. Hence, we basically have the Balkan powder keg, classical age edition going on over here with this situation. To make things even more complicated is the network of city-states scattered around all over the place. And although all the city-states are Delian aligned, and at the start of 431, the Odrysians are also Delian aligned, or at the very least they're friendly with the Delian League, mostly because they don't really want to fight all of the city-states and deal with Athenai blockading them, to some extent also in the Black Sea, which is not on this map, of course. But because of this, Macedon being Peloponnesian aligned, the Odrysians being Delian aligned, and then all of the city-states also being Delian aligned, as you can tell, there is a ton of potential for conflict in this area. This is a massive frontier of the war, and in fact, in the Peloponnesian War, a ton of the war actually happened around in this area, particularly in the Adonia region. This place was absolutely drenched in the blood of Macedonians, these tribal Odrysians, the local Hellenic colonists, and Athenian and Spartan armies that came up here. Famously, that giant march Brasidas did with that Lacedaemonian army up through Thessaly was to come up here and engage in fighting up here to help out Macedon. And something kind of fun as well is that Macedon, with their traditional blue color scheme, and the Odrysians, with their threatening red color scheme, have the opposite colors of their allegiances at game start, with Macedon being aligned, of course, with Lacedaemon, and then Odryssia being aligned with Athenai. Although Odryssia is only really aligned with Athenai kind of for political expediency. It's a bit like Elis, where Elis is not very convicted about the Lacedaemonian cause and the Peloponnesian cause, but it kind of just makes sense for them to not fight all of their neighbors. And similarly, in this area, Odryssia is bordered predominantly by Delian-aligned city-states, so the Odrysians really would benefit from keeping good relations with the Delians, who they do trade quite a bit with. But of course, the Odrysians are not Greek. They are very much not Greek. Even with the Macedonians, who are considered Greek because they're believed by, in the time period, to have been descended from settlers from Argos, so the Macedonians are considered Greek, and of course the city-states around here are considered Greek. The Odrysians are a tribal kingdom. They're very, very clearly different culture, and their diplomatic relations with the Greeks is sometimes strained because of that. And in many ways, the Peloponnesians have a ton of possible propaganda they can use about the Odrysians being these savage barbarians coming down from Thrace at the beck and call of those sinister Athenians to ravage the noble Macedonians. So you can sort of see how that would go in the period. So Odrysia is going to be an interesting ally for Athenai, sort of like Macedon, who is a ally of Lacedaemon directly and Peloponnesian line, but not necessarily in the Peloponnesian League system. Basiliae Odrysiae is not in the Delian League. It is an ally of Athenai directly, and similar to Macedon, it can change its alliance if the Delian hegemony changes to sort of follow the strongest hegemon. In fact, compared with Macedon, Basilia Odrysae has even more reasons to be have flexible foreign policy, as it were, when it comes to who they're allied with. And the Odrysians have an interesting sort of role to play here as well, because on top of being perhaps quite flexible and being open to changing their allegiances, they see this area as very much a distant frontier. The Odrysian kingdom, of course, is mostly basically up here, of course, off the map. So the way it's going to work for the Odrysians, and if you were to play as them, is they're going to belong to a kind of third kind of alignment, which I'm calling barbarian. Although they will be allied with Athenai and, diplomatically speaking, effectively Delian aligned, they and other major barbarian, or I shouldn't say major, other sort of non-Greek or barbarian tags on this map, like Parasa and some of the Epirot tribes, who at this time were not Hellenized, will be denoted by having this sort of fourth alignment going on. And the Odrysians, the way it's going to work in a gameplay way is that within the Air Society, which is again mostly sort of off-map, as it were, they're viewing this conflict as an opportunity to expand their coastal holdings on the Aegean Sea and get involved in the very lucrative Aegean trade. There's also some internal Odrysian politics I want to simulate if you were to play as the Basilia Odrysiae, where essentially you're playing as this kind of southern governorship down here with the actual Odrysian king not necessarily being in the game or in the mod, but perhaps there being sort of a mechanic where you get orders from the king from up north in the sort of the Thracian inland area that is not on the map to do different things. Another thing I want to do is have, when the game begins and you're playing as Basilia Odrysae, you're able to sort of pick where your capital will be, because you're basically playing as this borderland area at the very bottom edge of the Odrysian kingdom. So for example, you could pick the very strategically located city of Cyrrhus. Of course, I haven't laid out the cities yet, so ignore where there are currently cities. Cyrrhus is in this very crowded and very contentious Edonia region, which is split between the northern sort of edges of Macedon here, as well as some of the city-states, including the very important city-state of Amphipolis. Keep an eye on them, because when I do the second pass over this area later, these guys are getting a big glow-up, and they're going to be a very important and powerful Delian member as well, with Cyrrhus being right next door. You could also set your capital perhaps at somewhere over here somewhere. I think Dicaea was also a major city for the Odrysians, or something over here. Basically, everything over here will be held by the Odrysians, and in many ways, for the hegemon of the Delian League, the way that you're going to have to look at the northern Aegean area, right? Putting aside the complexity of Thessaly, which we talked about in the last video, Macedon is likely to remain Peloponnesian aligned as long as Perdiccas is on the throne. So if you're playing as the Delians, or you're playing as a ambitious, unaligned nation staying unaligned, like Argos, perhaps even someone like Ithaca, you could perhaps look to the north as a circumstance where you can empower one of the other claimants of the Macedonian throne in order to sort of switch Macedon away from being Peloponnesian leaning or Lacedaemonian supporting. You can also look to the Odrysian kingdom as a reliable source of chaos up here, as I'm thinking that when you play as the Odrysian kingdom, there will be special mechanics where essentially the inland Odrysians who are less Hellenized want the kingdom to basically just start raiding everybody along the coast, and they don't really care about the geopolitics of the war. And so the section of the kingdom you're playing as, the kind of coastal area you're playing as, or the near coastal area, your job is to basically either give in to the tribal bloodlust from the north and basically just start going into total war mode with everybody being rewarded with giant but kind of chaotic tribal levy armies you can basically send down to rampage through the area. Or you can basically hold them back and say, no, I've got bigger plans here. We're going to establish a proper Odrysian presence in the Greek world, and we're going to do it through both diplomacy and warfare, and using the Delian League as a way to gain further power, or I should say the Peloponnesian War as a way, and the Delian League as a way to gain further power and presence in this world. So I'm hoping that both Macedon and the Odrysian Kingdom, which again will include all this area over here, once I finish laying out these areas as it stands, this is all just a placeholder, but this over here is what's basically done. I'm hoping that both of these larger nations will have a lot of really interesting mechanics and really provide a really interesting alternative experience to just playing as a large, powerful hegemon like Athenai or Lacedaemon, similar to what playing as Parasa would be like. In fact, in many ways, the Odrysian Kingdom and Parasa have some similarities in the way you're playing as only a small section of the entire nation, with some kind of tension between you and the main part of it off-map. Or off-map once the map is obviously sort of set up correctly. I will say, by the way, and I've had some people ask about this in the comments, the plan at the moment is that when the mod is released, I will only basically include everything in my mouse here, ending kind of around this river, with the rest being sort of covered in fog or just removed from the file. I need to figure out exactly how to do that. But there won't be anything over here, essentially, both to help with the game's performance and because there's just no need to include those areas. They weren't part of the Peloponnesian War. Unfortunately, I can't include areas that were important parts of the Peloponnesian War, like Sicily, or some of the areas in Magna Graecia that were important theaters of the war, because this map just doesn't include them, and I'm not good enough at map modding to add them myself. But as I've said before, if any of you do happen to have a Bronze Age level zoomed in version of those areas, please let me know where I can find it, because I would love to include it. And adding those areas in some form or another is a long-term goal of the mod, especially post-launch, once I am making regular updates upon it as we proceed. And I should also note as well that, let's see here, yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to say about the Odrysian Kingdom and Macedon. Now, in terms of the city-states that are kind of crammed into this area here, and there will be more over here as well once I work on the area, in terms of some highlights, because there's just so many to cover here, and also, of course, all their colors and all their flags are a work in progress, although Macedon and the Odrysian Kingdom do have their final versions of their flags and colors laid out. In terms of the city-states here, putting aside, again, their flags and colors aren't designed yet, the most interesting and powerful city-states here, or I should say the most important city-states, probably Thasos over here on their island, Amphipolis, as noted a minute ago, over here as well. Batagay is a pretty important city-state here as well, and it's going to have a lot of special decisions to yield some of the land in its province to either the neighboring Odrysians or the neighboring Macedonians. Obviously, Batagay is right in between the borders of the two, with technically the two powers next to it not touching directly, but they're sort of reaching out their hands, and then Batagay is the space in between. So Batagay can play an unexpectedly oversized role in the diplomacy of these two serious enemies, so that could be pretty fun. And then over here in the Chalkidike region, down here in these three peninsulas, probably the most important city down here is Olinthos. Now, there's also another interesting nation I wanted to highlight because of its unique starting situation, which is the city-state of Methone, over here, completely enclosed by Macedon. This is basically the hard mode version of playing one of these northern Aegean city-states, as it's completely surrounded by Macedon, and Methone is, I believe, Delian aligned when the war begins. So Methone is going to be in a pretty desperate situation and will desperately need Athenai to send reinforcements to garrison the area, as Macedon can very easily just immediately capitulate them right away. So playing as Methone, you're going to be in quite a tough spot where you have to immediately either find a way to slow Macedon down and try to become friendly with them, or beckon Atenai over to protect you as fast as possible. So pretty interesting situation there. Sort of similar, actually, to playing as Platea or Igena, for what that's worth, in the sense of the immediacy of the difficulty you're going to be in. So that's the basic overview of this northern area, at least the section that I finished. Of course, I'm still going to work over here on this section here next, which is the rest of the northern area, but hopefully you're getting a sense of the basic layout we're going to see here, with the Basileae, Odrissae stretching further out this direction in most of the inland areas as well, with a few more city-states tucked in here where I can find them. One challenge I've had is that there's not a ton of great classical age maps of this area, or maps, not just maps made in the classical age, but maps of the classical age period of those areas. So my research has been a bit slow in figuring out where everybody was, and I have to make some gameplay considerations to squeeze all the important city-states in together, given that I didn't draw all of these individual tiles myself. These are all here from Bronze Age directly, so it is what it is. Now, having said all that, I'm actually going to hop out here so I can go to a different nation that has better religious unity, because the next thing I want to show you all is the system that I've worked on, which is the religion system and the deities known in Hegemony as alignment and policies. Now, this is very much a work in progress as well. Let me just go to Chalkis, I think. And essentially, don't get too excited about the specific numbers you're going to see on the screen here, as these are subject to change, but you're going to get the basic idea of what I'm going for here. So over here, the religion button is now the alignment button. View your current policies and reliquary. I'm still figuring out what to do with the reliquary, as I don't know how to use holy sites under this system, given that holy sites are pretty connected to the religion context. But here we are with a look at the alignment screen. Again, just ignore all the holy site stuff and the reliquary stuff, because I don't know exactly how that's going to work. But basically, the way it works now is, instead of deities, all of the alignments are going to have policies. And as it is right now, each type of policy, we've got policy on campaigning, policy on agriculture, policy on taxation, and policy on centralization, has 2 options. And I'm going to continually add more of these. I also think that I'm going to add one. So what I should say as well is all 8 that I currently have are going to be the generic ones that all the Greeks have. So that is to say, Delian, Peloponnesian, and unaligned alignment, with the barbarian alignment having their own versions that are not Greek related. But essentially, all 3 of the Greek alignments will have these exact same versions that are versions for each of the alignments, so that religious unity gives you the full bonuses, as opposed to it being, for example, like a default unaligned version, so that Delian religious unity would result in a weaker omen, which wouldn't really be fair. So basically, the technical way I'm doing it will result in whatever your alignment is. So essentially, the strength of the policy will come from more of your population being of the correct alignment. That's the best way to put it. Similar to how it works with religious unity, because I mean, it is literally how religious unity works, because it is religious unity. So a lot of the UI elements have not been adjusted yet. So again, just ignore all the references to religion and whatnot. But as for what these policies essentially do, these are the replacement for deities, because as I've said before in this mod, religion was not really a major part of this war, and with most of the playable nations being essentially the same religion, I thought it'd be more interesting to delve deeper into the politics part of this mod with this sort of policy area, as I've replaced the similar concept ideas from the base game with the priority system. So this is kind of my replacement for the original idea system. And the way this works as well at the moment is that switching policies has no cost at all. I will probably give switching policies a fairly large cost, but I'll have you have a modifier at the moment the game begins to set up policies as you like, perhaps. I may also have all the policies be on their default position. In fact, let me just quickly switch all the policies onto their default positions just to show you here. And yeah, this is probably what I want. All right. So basically, this is the default set of policies. In fact, what I might do is code all of the tags to start with these policies in effect, which I can do. So the way it works right now, and again, ignore the free cost to switch around policies that will be changed later. So these 4 categories are 4 kind of areas of politics that Greek city-states would have made decisions about. And a policy here is kind of in between just a priority or something as long-term as a law. So the priority system, again, over in the nation overview, this is stuff that is more kind of like, temporary. We're going to do this temporarily. And then I haven't changed this all yet, but the laws are going to be obviously things that are more permanent, harder to change. And so policies are kind of in the middle, right? There's something that the state is encouraging and focusing on, but it's not necessarily legally binding. It's just kind of a longer term priority. So it's kind of in that middle. And so the first category is policy on campaigning. And again, keep in mind that all we've got here is the very base minimum. There will be more of these for all of these different categories. What I want to eventually have probably is maybe 3 generic ones, and currently I have 2 generic ones for each category, with then 2 that are sort of specific to each alignment. So the Delian 5 would be the 3 generic ones in their Delian versions, and then the 2 Delian ones that are only for the Delians. The 5 ones per category for Peloponnesians would be the 3 generic ones in their sort of Peloponnesian version. Again, with no differences between the different versions of the same one, just so that the omen power modifier is being applied correctly. You get the picture. So the 2 generic ones I have for each category. For campaigning, the first one is seasonal warfare. Seasonal campaigning is traditional and ensures our citizen soldiers have returned in time for each harvest season. This gives you a default plus 0.10 stab change, and when you emphasize it, because an omen in Hegemony is called emphasizing the policy, emphasizing our policy of seasonal warfare gives us basically 50% of the effect again for 1 year. So there's 1 year long omen duration. This allows you to pretty frequently and situationally change your omen or your emphasization as the game progresses. And I may eventually think of enough different ways to express the lore of each of these policies to have the sort of omen effect or the emphasize effect be a different modifier. For now, the plan is just to have the actual main effect of the underlying policy be what is represented, or how am I trying to say this? For now, the plan is that the effect of the passive effect of the policy is used a second time at half power, up to half power, because again, 100% is half power. If you have less than 100% omen power, it's going to be a lower number scaling up to 50% of the total passive amount. So stab change plus 0.10, and then stab change plus up to plus 0.05 if you have at least 100% omen power. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And here's another example here, global monthly food modifier 10.30, because we have 103%, and that is 50%, I guess it'd be 56%. I don't know exactly how the math works out, but you get the basic idea. So you get the passive effect always when it's in your pantheon of policies, and then you get the omen effect when you emphasize it, and you can emphasize 1 per year, every single year, and then every year the emphasization ends. So starting it on January 1st, then every January 1st of every year, you're getting the chance to pick a new policy to emphasize. So that's the basic way that that works. Hopefully I explained that okay. And seasonal warfare is the default one for campaigning. The other one is irregular warfare. This replaces it with a pretty good war score cost reduction bonus. Again, keep in mind all these actual numbers and the modifiers are placeholders. This is what I generally think I'm going to go for, but I need to, of course, balance everything once I've designed all the systems, and I kind of do another pass through. But this is the basic idea. Irregular campaigning is uncommon and thus gives us the needed initiative against our unexpected enemies. So this, of course, is going to be something that you want to switch to when you want to end a war more quickly. You want to get that edge, but you're going to lose out on the stability bonus from the more familiar and normal seasonal warfare being in effect. As for the policy on agriculture, the default is Cetos farming with a global monthly food modifier bonus and emphasis bonus. Cetos or cereal grains are our predominant food resource, which is true. The alternative is Elea farming, Elea being olives, which you can make olive oil with. This switches it over to an export value bonus, so if you want to focus on your food production, you focus on, farming cereal grains. If you want to focus on the commerce effect of your agriculture, you're going for this olive farming policy. So that's sort of the way that works. As for taxation, the first one is liturgies. Liturgies are donations requested of our people from time to time for public works, shipbuilding, and other costs. Because this is the normal way taxation works and everyone's pretty okay with it, you get a happiness bonus and a happiness, obviously, emphasis bonus, with the alternative being Asphora. The Asphora is a lucrative though unpopular wealth tax on our richest citizens, expected to be imposed only sparingly. So this gives you a very strong national tax bonus, but of course, because I don't want to have the bonus you get actually be a negative, I'm essentially having the opportunity cost of losing the happiness bonus from the other one be how the unhappiness at the Esphora is sort of depicted. And the Esphora was uncommon. It's pretty well understood that during this period, taxation on the people was not very common, and generally people saw sort of relatively voluntary donations to the state as part of their civic duty as citizens. Of course, taxation on non-citizens was pretty common, but either way. Lastly, in the centralization category, we've got two options here. Diocesan, which is the policy of dispersing the population of our cities into the surrounding countryside. This just reduces unrest. This helps kind of stabilize your nation as the crowded cities are allowed to empty out into the countryside where people have more autonomy. Or synocism, which was the policy of concentrating the population of the countryside into our cities. This gives you a big garrison size bonus. So this is something that you want to switch to defensively when you need to have big, beefy garrisons. I've not really done the balancing yet for the buildings, which is where most of the garrison size will come from. But synocism is definitely something you're going to want to keep in your back pocket, especially if you're being invaded and you need to make sure that your forts have got the sufficient fort level to hold out long enough for someone stronger to come and save you. So that's the basic way the policies work. And keep in mind the holy sites are probably not going to be a mechanic in the mod because I sort of don't know what to use them for. One thing that I thought about is trying to have league treasuries be a thing that holy sites represent. But the problem is holy sites are tied to specific deities, in this case policies, and there's no way to really coherently tie treasuries to specific policies, although having the treasuries be maybe modifiers on specific tiles or otherwise noted in the mod somewhere could certainly be pretty interesting, as this was an important part of the politics of the leagues, in particular the Delian League, where the treasury was initially on Delos, and then was eventually moved to Athenai directly, where it was mostly used in a very non-league-like way to fund the construction of the Parthenon sort of complex on the Acropolis. So just a fun note there. Something else I wanted to mention as well is a mission or I should say a series of missions that I've kind of conceptualized for Athenai in particular. Really, I should say any Delian member. Or really what I should say is for either of the leagues. I guess I'm thinking about it through the lens of Athenai, but what I'm thinking is that once you are once you're kind of winning the game, right? You're hegemon of your league, you're Lacedaemon, and you've got the Peloponnesian League very much under your control. You're Athenai, you've got the Delian League very much under your control, or whatever's going on, and you want to kind of take it to the next level above just being hegemon of a bunch of different, potentially still squabbling, countries and city-states. Maybe you've set up some of those regional leagues all over the place to force everyone to be in peace together, something like that. Something that you can do eventually, I think, and this is an idea that I'm still open to feedback on because this is a pretty major endgame concept to go for, is there might be some way in which one way to kind of transform your gains and your expansion of your league into your direct power level for the future is if you have a decision you can click or some sort of action you can take where essentially all of the league members of your extremely low autonomy league, where you're like the super hegemon, you have complete control over everything, are annexed into your direct ownership. And also, perhaps, there's essentially a way that I can simulate coring from other Paradox games, where what would happen in this context is that maybe region by region or section or province by province even, you spend resources to transform all of the population there into your native main population to essentially core it and turn that population into its highest productive version for your nation. So this could be a really cool way where sort of the end game experience as someone who has essentially won the war, you've defeated all of your enemies, you've got power all over the Greek world. Now it's time to really transform the Greek world into your actual empire, as Athenai was accused of doing with the Delian League. What you can do is section by section transform these different holdings into areas that you control directly, that are of your culture, and you can basically benefit from that. And that can be sort of an end game goal of the mod for someone that plays that far and kind of wins the war, as it were. So lots of cool ideas, and I'm really excited to hear people's feedback in the comments on that idea. Obviously, I'm still sort of thinking it through, and I want it to be something that is very much only possible in the very, very late game, after the war is essentially won and there's basically nobody else that can stop you. Although one other thing I've thought about is that might be something I add later on in the kind of future of the mod, as I add more of the area where Parsa would control, so that you could basically play as somebody unifying the Greek world together in order to fight Parsa, which, if you know the history, is what Macedon actually did in real history. After the Peloponnesian War, Macedon essentially took over this entire area, and then Alexander fought Parsa, which is exactly kind of the system that I'm describing here. And so perhaps you could eventually, or I could eventually, with the mod's development, have more and more of Parsa be included, on the map in its sort of final form, and this kind of late game unify the Greek world together to fight the Persians thing can actually be the final kind of goal of any campaign, which could be really cool. But at the end of the day, that is very much a late game concept and perhaps not even going to be in the mod when the mod is first released. Those are just some cool hypothetical ways it could go in the future. For now, I want to focus on the systems that will be in the mod at release and make sure that they're all carefully balanced and set up correctly. So that's basically the extent of what I have to share for this dev diary. I have a I thought I should I've got a special guest with me here. I wanted to introduce her as well. This is my girlfriend.
Hi.
She's been watching in the background and probably thinking about how much she doesn't want to be my girlfriend now after. No, she's a fan of the project. She thinks it's cute how much I focus on it. So, yeah. Anyways, but thank you all so much for watching. I just wanted to show my little cameo here at the end. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about the stuff I've talked about in this dev diary. And of course, please come over and join the Hegemony Discord as well for frequent updates on what I'm working on. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.